And if you're living in a time of summer right now where things are working well and life is moving along at a good pace for you, allow yourself to embrace gratitude. Feel that joy and gratitude, and don't let yourself take it for granted. Whatever season you're in right now, know that there's a gift in it for you. It's a part of your soul's journey. And whatever season you're in, know that at some point you're going to move into another season. So if you're in fall or winter right now, know and trust that spring and summer are coming. If you're in spring and summer, that season of abundance, enjoy it. Embrace it, appreciate it, because it could change. And also, don't forget to be sensitive to the people around you that might be in a different season than you are. To everything, there is a season. Turn, 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 and a time for every purpose under heaven. That was awesome, wasn't that? So you might be wondering why I'm sitting. I have an inner ear problem, and every once in a while I have problems with dizziness, and I had an episode worse than I have ever had on Thursday. I literally couldn't get up or walk without Tim's help, and I ended up in the ER. So it's much better today. I'm much grateful. But to just be safe, I'm going to sit. So, all right. So we have been exploring the book, Let Your Life Speak, listening for the voice of vocation by Parker J. Palmer. And we're ending that series today. So I hope you've been reading the book. I know some of you have been in spirit groups and discussing it. And I know there's still some copies of it in the bookstore. And we've learned that Parker doesn't talk about vocation as finding your right job in life, but rather listening and growing in consciousness to discover and awaken our true self. So in this last chapter, he talks about the different seasons in nature as a metaphor for how we move through our spiritual life. Now, if you live in Texas, you may not be aware that there are actually 4 seasons in other places in the country. And there's quite a lot of discussion of it on social media about how many seasons Texas actually has. I did find one that said Texas had 4 seasons, and they were almost summer, summer, still summer, and Christmas. But the one I saw the most often said that we had 12 seasons. And those seasons are winter, fool's spring, second winter, spring of deception, third winter, the pollinating. You know, that pollen season, actual spring, summer, hell's front porch, false fall, second summer, and then actual fall. And sometimes all 12 of those happen in one week. Sometimes even in one day. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a preference regarding the seasons, and I much prefer summer. I love hot weather. I don't even mind it when it's over 100, as long as I don't have to be out working in it. But I love going from an air-conditioned house out into that heat. There's just something about it that I love. Now, I don't like winter at all. I hate being cold. I hate the dark nights. I have seasonal affective disorder, which I had even in California, believe it or not. So I get like a hermit in winter. And I go through depression, which Tammy talked about a couple weeks ago. And I've learned to adjust. I have some special lights that I use and some medication that I take, and I get some really warm fur-lined boots, and mostly I just stay home. The thing that saves me is that Christmas is my favorite holiday, so that kind of gets me through winter okay. But I know that winter is a needed season. All of them serve their purpose. So it doesn't do any good to hate one or resist it. We have to just find ways to live with all of them. So you're probably familiar with Ecclesiastes chapter 3. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. Just like that song that we sang by the Byrds, turn, turn, turn. Now, except for the words turn, 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 all of the other words in that song are in Ecclesiastes. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, and so on, and so on, and so on. It's a very long chapter. And so there is a time for everything in our lives, especially all of the stages and seasons of our spiritual journey. And through Palmer's words and his book, we have looked at our journey to our selfhood and vocation through a metaphorical lens, from the seed of our true self that is planted in the world at our birth, to the journey we take through the darkness toward the light. And now he uses the metaphor of the seasons to look at our journey of selfhood. And he points out that in America, we look more at making our life rather than growing our life. I found it interesting that he said a Chinese child would ask, how does a baby grow? An American child would say, how do we make a baby? And in America, we use the terms make. We say we make time, we make friends, we make meaning, we make money, we make a living, we make love. And yet, we don't make our lives, do we? No, we grow our lives, we evolve our lives. And so let us look at the seasons, and as we do that, I ask you to each sort of look at your own life and notice maybe what season that you are currently experiencing. And unlike the seasons in nature, the seasons of our soul don't have a particular length. So you could find yourself in winter for a year, or maybe in summer for a decade. And then again, you might go through all seasons in one day. So first we will look at autumn, or sometimes we call it fall. Now again, in Texas, we don't really have autumn like some of the other places in America. We have a few leaves that turn colors, but certainly not like, say, in Vermont. But we often think of autumn as a season of beauty. We just look at all the beautiful colors in the leaves. And yet, it's also a season of decline. The days grow shorter. We see the beginning of decay of the leaves fall, and the other fauna is falling away and dying. And yet, Palmer said something that I had never thought of. And he pointed out that it's during this time when everything is dying, that is the time when the seeds are scattered that will bring the new growth in spring. And so autumn in our spiritual life is that time in life where everything is slowing down. Areas of our life are preparing to die or to end. It's a time of transition. Something in our life is changing or waning or ending. Maybe it's a job or a relationship or your health. We see it often in organizations and churches and even in our country. It's that time when things are waning and slowing down. And I read somewhere that each season has an emotion, and the emotion of autumn is anxiety. Most of us don't like transition. There's something in us that resists change. We know it's a necessary part of life, but we still kind of resist it. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Not in his goals, but in his transitions, man is great." William Bridges, who wrote a couple of books on transition, explains this transition model in 3 stages. He said there's the ending, the neutral zone, and then the new beginning. And it's that neutral zone that hangs us up every time. We tend to want to get out of it as quickly as possible. and yet it serves its purpose. Things are changing. We don't know yet what's happening or what's next. It might feel like nothing is going on during that neutral zone period, and yet Palmer assures us that that is the time we can be assured that even during what feels like change and dying, that the seeds for our future, for our new beginning, are being planted. And there's a lot of work. You can't rush that stage. You know, you have to truly feel what it feels like to let go. You have to then be still and just be in that space for a while, and then know and trust that the seeds for the future are being planted. And I remember when that happened in my life, when I read this, what Palmer had said, I was reminded of my very first church was in Bainbridge Island, Washington. And I was just out of ministerial school, and I went there, and I was there for 4 years, and things were doing really well for 4 years, and then something shifted, something changed, and I could feel it. And I had certain board members that were against me, and so I called in Reverend Gary Simmons, who's trained in transition and conflict management. So he came in, he worked with our board, he worked with the congregation, he worked with me, and it was during that time when I got the message that it was time for me to leave this church. And so I gave my notice. So you can imagine I have a little bit of anxiety. I don't have a job. I don't know what's next. And yet, the amazing thing is that the seeds for my next church were being planted right then. What happened was Reverend Gary Simmons, who I had invited in, had just left his church in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And one of the reasons that I was struggling with this church was my introversion. And Gary said, "You would do really well in my old church." He said, "I'm way more introverted than you, and they'll love you." So I applied, I got hired, and I went to Fayetteville, Arkansas. Thomas Merton said, "There is in all visible things a hidden wholeness. Darkness and light, death and light are not opposites. They're held together in the paradox of hidden wholeness." And Reverend Cynthia talked about this last week, and she told us that we are whole. Wholeness is not something we need to seek. We're not broken. We don't need to be fixed. All of what we are and all of what we experience, the darkness, the light, the joy, the struggle, they're all part of the wholeness that is us. So the paradox is that opposites do not negate each other. They're part of the unity that exists, and they need each other. We breathe in, we breathe out. Try doing just one of those. Can't do it. We have day, we have night, we have darkness, we have light. They're all part of the wholeness, and they're all needed, not only in nature, but in our spiritual lives as well. And so now we move to winter. And again, we have it pretty easy here in Texas compared to, say, the upper Middle West. A humorist once joked that there, winter wasn't a weather, but rather divine retribution. He said that at some time, somebody did something very, very, very bad, and they were still paying the price. Well, here in Texas, we may get below 0 temperatures. Sometimes we even get an ice storm and snow. But then the very next week, it'll be back to 60 degrees, maybe even 80. We just had that in the last couple weeks. Winter's a time of loss, and we've all experienced time, and we all deal with that loss differently. So the emotion for winter is sadness. And as dank and dark and gloomy as winter sometimes seems, there's also a beauty to it. There's nothing like walking outside in the morning right after a snowfall. It's so beautiful and peaceful. Palmer tells us that winter serves as a reminder that times of dormancy and deep rest are essential to all living things. And while it might look like nature has died, it hasn't. It's simply gone underground in order to renew itself and prepare for spring. So winter is a time for us to do the same for ourselves. We all need that time of quiet and replenishment. Palmer says winter also brings more clarity if we're open to it. You know, when you take a walk out in nature in winter, the leaves are gone from the trees and the bushes are gone and the trees are just, you can see farther and clearer. You can actually see the very ground of our being. Now, again, I don't know about you, but I tend to hibernate in the winter. I bundle up at home. It takes me a lot to venture out because I hate being cold. But I've learned that if I do hibernate, that I seem to sink more deeply into that dark space, and it becomes harder and harder to pull myself out of it. And so I have to get out in it. And I've learned that if I put on my fur-lined boots and warm clothes and earmuffs, and I make myself venture out now and then. So the winter of our soul takes many forms. It could be failure, depression, death, betrayal. And our tendency during that time sometimes is to hibernate and hide. And a little of that is appropriate. But eventually, we find we have to get out into that winter. We have to face our fears, face our feelings, all those things we want to avoid, or they will dominate our life. And so we warm ourselves with our friendships and our spiritual guidance and our inner work. And when we do that, we can learn the lesson that's trying to break through that winter of our soul. And we can once again remember that the cycles of the season are necessary in our spiritual journey. Winter doesn't last forever, not in nature and not in our own lives. So if you're experiencing a winter right now, know and trust that spring will come. The hope of spring is eternal. And if someone in your life is experiencing winter, just be there for them. You don't have to have any words of wisdom. Just be a presence and let them know they're not alone. And so after that long, dank dark of winter, we move into spring. And we think of spring as something beautiful and full of new buds and flowers singing. And while that's eventually where spring heads, Palmer reminds us that it first goes through an ugly phase. Lots of rain and mud and muck. And yet it's in that messy part of spring where the rebirth is being created. And the emotion for spring is excitement. And don't we feel that when spring comes? We feel that excitement for the newness and the birth and the beauty. Springtime in our spiritual journey is that time of new life and new beginnings. And even though most of us are excited when there's a new beginning, sometimes they can feel a little wobbly. You might take a couple steps back and then 3 steps backwards. It's new. We don't quite know how things are going to be yet. And isn't how the beginning of spring feels like that? It feels like spring is here and we start to get all excited, and then all of a sudden winter's back. And then the next day spring is back. Palmer talks about the word humus, which is that organic compound of soil that's formed by the decomposition of all the leaves and plant material, and it's used to feed the roots of the plant. But that same word, humus, is the root word of the word humility. And he says this helps him understand that the humiliating events of life that leave mud on your face or make your name mud may create the fertile soil with which something new can grow. So even in our new beginnings, it might feel a little uncertain or wobbly. There's that excitement of what's coming. And spring is an amazing time. It's a time when things just pop up all over the place where it seemed so barren just days before. And I remember in particular a time when I went to Unity Village. This was before I went to ministerial school. I had just gone to the village for some classes. And if you've never been, I really encourage you to go. It's awesome there. There's an energy that's palpable. You can feel it. There are people praying 24 hours a day on the grounds. And there's lots of grass and trees and deer and birds and rabbits and squirrels, and it's just an awesome place to be. But I remember I was staying in the cabins, hotels, and there's this path that walks to the inn. And on either side of the path, there's grass and lawn and trees. And I was walking to the inn one day, and I looked over, and all of a sudden, there were 3 feet tall flowers that had not been there the day before. Now, I found out that they're called naked ladies. Naked ladies because it's just a stem with no leaves and then this blossom on the top. And sometimes they're called surprise lilies or resurrection lilies. And they literally pop up overnight. One day there's nothing. Now, there might have been a stem that you couldn't see there, but it's like all of a sudden it just pops up and the flower pops out. And so Palmer tells us that in the springtime of our soul, we are reminded to look more carefully for those green stems of possibility, for the intuitive touch that might turn into a larger insight, for the glance or touch that might thaw a frozen relationship, for that stranger's act of kindness that might make the world seem hospitable again. At some point, spring bursts into full blossom with an abundance of flowers and bushes and bees and birds singing. And the springtime of our soul is often when we're blossoming into a new relationship, a new career, maybe we're trying a new hobby. Things seem wonderful and precious. So spring is a time to rejoice in that pure pleasure of life and to embrace it all. It's a time to step boldly into your new beginning and embrace that time of renewal. And that moves us into summer. Now, I've told you how much I love summer, but I know some of you don't. Some of you think it's too hot, and it's too hot way too long, and it lasts forever. And yet, think about it. Think about those people in the upper Midwest who've had to live through a long, cold, hard winter. For them, summer is a godsend. It's a time of shorts and flip-flops and fireworks and watermelon and art festivals and swimming pools and sprinklers and ice cream and ice-cold lemonade. Do you remember when you were back in school and how you waited for those 3 months of summer? So what is summer as a season of the soul? Summer is a season of abundance. And the primary emotion for summer is joy. Perhaps we don't appreciate that season enough when we're living in it. As a season of the soul, summer's when things are going well. We have everything we need. We're living in abundance. And in the USA, we seem to tend to live with more of a culture of scarcity. All of our advertisements seem to speak to this. There's always something more you need. Well, what we teach in Unity is what you focus on is what you have more of. And so if you're focusing on scarcity, you'll have more scarcity. And so the season of summer is to celebrate and appreciate the abundance of what we have in the moment. And if you're living in a time of summer right now where things are working well and life is moving along at a good pace for you, allow yourself to embrace gratitude. Feel that joy and gratitude, and don't let yourself take it for granted. Whatever season you're in right now, know that there's a gift in it for you. It's a part of your soul's journey. And whatever season you're in, know that at some point you're going to move into another season. So if you're in fall or winter right now, know and trust that spring and summer are coming. If you're in spring and summer, that season of abundance, enjoy it, embrace it, appreciate it, because it could change. And also, don't forget to be sensitive to the people around you that might be in a different season than you are. To everything there is a season. Turn, 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 and a time for every purpose under heaven. God bless you.
Led by UCOH congregant and Unity student Comfort Ize, Keep a True Lent will be in the chapel on Friday evenings from 6 to 7 p.m. until Good Friday. Participants will follow the Unity 40 Days Let Go, Let God booklet guideline and Emmett Fox's 7-day mental diet during the 40 days. The Unity booklet Let Go, Let God is available in the bookstore. On Monday, March 4th, you are invited to Friendship Hall at 6:30 p.m. for an intimate gathering led by Anaya, me, and guided by the healing wisdom of herbal cacao. We will create a sacred space within and around to set intention and receive all that wishes to release and arrive. Then join Dr. Paul Hubbard as he shares his amazing gift of holographic sound at 7:30 in the sanctuary. We have some exciting news coming up. Save the date for A Course in Miracles retreat, Experiencing Miracles, a full-day retreat on Saturday, April 6th. Registration is open online. Paul Selig is returning to UCOH for a weekend workshop, May 11th and 12th. So take advantage of early bird pricing. Tickets are available now. Then on June 18th, acclaimed transformational teacher Lee Harris will be here for an unforgettable evening workshop. We are happy to welcome Susan Wade to our UCOH staff as accounting manager. Susan has served in our finance department before, and we are blessed and thrilled to have her back in the fold. Next Sunday, join Reverend Jean Lean, who brings us a powerful message titled, The Power of an Endless Life, at the 8:30 contemplative service on Sunday in Friendship Hall or on Facebook. Grab a cup of coffee and a pastry and join her. In the 11:30 service, we welcome guest speaker Reverend Jill Carey. Join Jill in the sanctuary or online for her enriching talk titled, Take the Scenic Route, Skip the Bypass, as she explores the integration of new thought principles with deep psycho-spiritual healing, avoiding bypassing one in favor of another in order to live rich, fulfilling lives. Our Easter service on Monday, March 31st will be at 10:30 a.m. instead of our regular 11:30 a.m. time. We have an especially wonderful day planned for you. This is a great opportunity for us to come together as a spiritual family in community to invite friends, family, and neighbors to our church home to share our sacred time, special connection, and celebration of this blessed day. Please make plans to help with the festivities by signing up in the foyer or registering online for one of the volunteer teams. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful.